Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Kelsey LaFave. Before we get started, I'd like to offer a few technology tips to keep in mind while you're viewing today's webinar. First, all attendees are muted throughout the presentation. Once in a while, it's a good idea to tap your mouse so that your screen does not go to sleep during the presentation. There will be a time for questions and answers at the end of the presentation. Questions can be text chatted in at any point during the presentation. To send in your question, click on the question mark button on the top right side of your screen to expand a question box where you can then type your question. And then a recording of today's webinar and the presentation materials will be available at farmcrediteast.com as well as on our YouTube channel. And then quick disclaimer, this information is presented in good faith and is not intended for investment, tax, or legal advice. Okay, so today we have Farm Credit East Senior Loan Officer, Ghent Holdsworth, presenting an outlook on the potato industry. I will now hand it over to Ghent. Okay,
Good
should be able
afternoon,
to.
everyone. Again, Kelsey indicated my name is Ghent Holdsworth. I am a Vice President and Senior Loan Officer in our Presque Isle, Maine office. I've been with Farm Credit a little over 23 years, and out of our office here in Presque Isle, I think we finance probably the majority of the potato loans that we have. Of course, we do have potato farms scattered throughout our territory, but I think the largest concentration would be here in northern Maine. And so for that reason, apparently somebody thinks that I'm the expert. So what I'd like to do today is kind of go over kind of an overview of the 24 potato crop across the country and North America and then the world, and then kind of talk about kind of what I see as the outlook for 2025. Again, thank you to Kelsey for kind of being behind the scenes and monitoring the text chat. If you have questions as we go through, feel free to chat them in, as she mentioned, and we'll try to have time at the end to be able to answer all of those questions. So with
Yeah,
that,
real quick,
sure.
could you put your view in presenter mode just so the slideshow is bigger?
Okay, how do I do that, Kelsey?
I think if you just hit the podium icon down below, down, do you see like notes and like the option to, yeah, the
Yeah,
podium
okay. Which one is that?
over two more.
Right here?
Yep, that should
Okay.
maybe. If not, I guess let's go up to slideshow up at the top.
Bear with us, folks.
Right. Oh yeah, that should work too.
See if
Okay, I guess try a slideshow again.
let me see. It's on another screen here. Let me see if I can get that over to this. Is that helping any, Kelsey?
Nope, it must still be
No.
on the other screen.
Yeah, how do I get that over here?
I think if you, so do you see like presenter notes or like a presenter?
Use presenter view.
You should, if you see display settings there at all, you should be able to swap screens. If
Okay.
not, we could also increase, just make the slides bigger and we can go with that.
Okay, let's.
Yeah, if you just use the plus sign down there,
Down here. Okay.
we could just make it a little bigger.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can just go with
Is that
that.
better?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, so first off, the summary of the 2024 North American potato crop. So for 2024 North American, which includes the United States and Canada, potato growers produced an estimated five, 547, just over 547 million hundredweight. This was actually a decrease from the prior year of about 19 and a half million hundredweight, or a reduction of about 3.4%. Of that, U.S. potato producers decreased their production by nearly a full 20 million hundredweight, or 4.5%. The Canadian growers showed a slight increase in production of less than 400,000 hundredweight, or 0.3%. Average yields for 2024 were estimated to be down slightly overall from the 2023 crop by about 500 weight per acre to an average yield of about 410 hundredweight across the country. Overall, supplies of table stock potatoes in general are down slightly from last year, while supplies of processing potatoes appear to generally be in balance with contract levels across the country. There are some minor variations to that between the different growing areas that grow for the frozen processing industry, but in general, supplies are thought to be in a good balance there. That's different from a number of years ago when there were kind of supply imbalances in different areas of the country. I know here locally in the state of Maine, a few years back, there was an abundance of supply here, and some potatoes of fry quality actually ended up making their way out to the Pacific Northwest, where they had some production challenges in a couple of different years that kind of left their French fry plants a little short of product to run. Regarding the chipstock sector, chipstock supplies appear to be plentiful nationally. There's very little demand currently for open market chip potatoes, and most chip supplies are moving under contracts to the various chippers across the country. Seed supplies are generally also down slightly on a national basis, although despite that slight downturn, it is expected that there are sufficient supplies of seed available to plant the 2025 potato crop. Moving on to an overview of the European crop situation. The European crop is fairly significant as the EU countries are the major supplier and exporter of French fries globally. And last year the European crop was quite short, so that actually enabled North American French fry producers to gain a little bit of market share. The 5 major European potato producing countries are Germany, France, Netherlands, Belgium, and Poland. And of those 5, they are estimated to have produced just over 830 million hundredweight of potatoes from the 2024 crop. This is an increase of just over 30 million hundredweight from 2023 and nearly 56 million more than 2022. These 5 areas grow a combined 2.4 million acres of potatoes, which is an increase, or was an increase of nearly 7% over 2023. As I stated, the European crop is important in the fact that they're a major competitor in the French fry business and frozen potato products business to the US and Canada in the global French fry trade. Speaking of the global French fry trade, as we see it right now, it continues to expand. Although there are a few signs lately that maybe it is starting to slow down a little bit, but the expectation is that the global French fry industry and global French fry trade will continue to increase over the coming years. Increased production in Europe will likely mean that US and Canadian French fry plants will probably see some of their market share that they were able to gain in the last couple of years due to lower European production be given back. But it still seems like the global French fry business is in pretty good shape with enough raw product, this year from the combined 24 crop in the United States and Canada, plus the increased European crop to be able to supply global demand. Moving on to specific industry sectors. As I mentioned earlier, the chipstock sector seems to have plentiful supplies nationally. Um, the chipstock crop is pretty much running on solely contracted production with very little demand for open chipstock. Both Michigan and Maine in the United States produced larger chipstock crops than the previous year. This helped to partially offset reduced production from Wisconsin. Storage conditions, for the inventory in Michigan and Maine are reported to be very good, with favorable harvest conditions this past year, while the Wisconsin inventory is indicated to have some level of storage challenges, which could potentially reduce further supplies from that area. Overall, as this chart shows, generally speaking, since the beginning of the 24-25 marketing season, chipstock movement has generally been lagging behind last year's pace, overall down about 7% in this period. It started off pretty significantly below the previous year in October, and then has kind of been gaining ground through November and December. And the most recent indications are, but not necessarily noted here, that chipstock movement in January was actually above the prior year. So it looks like things have turned around a little bit with regards to the chipstock sector, but overall supplies are generally in a pretty good balance with overall demand, more so than a year ago. Moving on to the frozen processing sector. Again, North American exports of fry and other frozen products increased by a little over 5.5% in Q3 2024. Overall, the production of fry quality potatoes is generally lower from the 24 crop than it was from the 23-24 processing season. But it is felt that supplies are adequate for fryers to be able to meet the demands of their French fry buyers. The past 2 years have seen a reversal of the raw product supply shortfall that occurred both in 21 and 22, which those are the years that I mentioned earlier that saw French fry quality fry potatoes moving from one area to be processed in another area. That happened 2 years in a row with potatoes moving from Maine to the Pacific Northwest. And then in 23, the reverse of that happened with some challenging growing conditions here in Maine, where fry quality potatoes came to Maine or potentially the maritime provinces in Canada to supply local French fry plants here. North American fryers were able to increase their share of the global fry export business during the 23-24 processing season due to adequate supplies nationally and a reduced crop in the major French fry producing areas of Europe. Their share of the global trade increased from about 21.2% to 23.4% during that time. Given that there are reduced North American raw product supplies from the 24 crop and a larger crop in Europe, it is expected and likely that over the coming months that North American fry companies will likely see their share of that trade decrease from the previous year. Global Q3 2024 frozen potato products trade increased by a total of about almost 28 million pounds, or 1.2%, and that kind of lends support to my earlier statement that that it appears that the global French fry business is still expanding and continues to expand. 54% of that Q3 sales were concentrated in the UK, Japan, Mexico, Brazil, the United States, and Saudi Arabia. Those are the major countries that import French fry potatoes. Interesting to note, and I don't necessarily have a slide on this, but one thing to note in the global French fry trade is China is becoming an ever bigger player in the global French fry business. Their export business in French fries exceeded 100 million pounds in 2024, which was nearly double the previous year and up from only 20 million pounds back in 2021. So, as with anything that China does, typically they are becoming a bigger player in the global French fry trade, and it'll be interesting to see moving forward how much more that industry expands. Moving on to the other industry sectors, when it comes to seed. Nationally, seed production was down from an acreage standpoint for the 2024 crop year. U.S. seed acres decreased by just shy of 3,000 acres from 2023 and totaled a little over 107,000 acres across the U.S., while Canadian seed acres showed an increase of just over 2,200 acres or 4%, but the net between the two still showed a slight reduction. The quality of the overall seed crop nationally appears to be very good, kind of from a collective standpoint. And so despite the reduced overall acreage, with some good growing conditions, the seed quality is expected to be very good. And although overall supplies may be down a little bit from the previous year, it appears that there should be plenty of seed to go around with regards to planting the 2025 crop. The Russet Burbank variety, interestingly enough, continues to be the primary seed variety both across the U.S. and in Canada, with just over 27,000 acres combined grown between the U.S. and Canada, and that represents about 17% of the total seed acres grown. The Russet Norcota variety and Frito-Lay varieties account for the next two largest acreage components of seed at 13,000 and about 10.5 thousand or 10,500 acres respectively. Again, seed quality expected to be very good this year. I think there are still some challenges, particularly here in Maine with some of our seed readings, but the seed industry is working pretty diligently to try to get those seed readings lower and improve on those, as we move forward. Moving on to table stock. Again, despite an overall reduction in total supplies for the table stock sector from the previous year, generally speaking, open market table stock prices have been lower since the beginning of the marketing season, really through today. They have found their bottom, and actually year over year prices right now in some areas are even a little bit better than they were the previous year. But generally speaking, in a lot of cases, especially in the Pacific Northwest, the price is below the cost of production. That's not the case necessarily in every area, but generally speaking, again, table stock prices are down below year earlier levels. That does have some differentiation between varieties and depending on the pack mixture that might be going out in the table stock business. The one big wild card here is kind of the tariff concerns that are currently out there. I think that currently Canadian growers in the table stock market they are looking to really push their product into the U.S. Markets because of that threat for potential future tariffs, which is shown here in this slide that Canadian growers have shipped about 3.2 million hundredweight through the end of December, which is an increase of nearly 10%. So that says to me that growers in Canada are trying to take advantage of the markets the way that they are before any potential tariffs would come into play. Okay, moving on to kind of the 2025 crop outlook. Really, it's a little early here to be able to really know a good idea of what we're looking at for 2025. It's kind of a unique situation here in the potato market where normally when you see a reduction in the overall production in the potato industry, typically markets respond, obviously because of supply and demand from a price standpoint. And we just haven't seen that this year, especially in the open table stock market, whereas prices are lower than the prior year, despite the despite the reduction in overall production. And so I think that's gonna create an interesting dynamic as growers start to plan for the 25 crop. Normally, if production would have decreased and we had seen an increase in prices in the open market, that would have most likely led to increased acres for the 25 crop. So the dynamic of having decreased production and also decreased price in the open market will be an interesting fact to see whether that encourages growers to cut back additionally on acreage or encourages further production in order to rebound the overall production across the country. Interesting recent events in January here kind of on the eastern coast of the United States. There's been a lot of freezing temperatures as far south as Florida, and some of the Florida crop got hurt a little bit in January with some sub-zero temperatures. I don't think there's been any disastrous effects on that crop, but it's basically set the crop back a little bit. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the market conditions, because it probably will delay the Florida crop from hitting the open table stock and or chip stock markets here in the next several months. Again, open market prices remain below break-even levels in many areas, despite a 5% reduction in overall production. And frozen potato French fry contracts are just starting to be negotiated across the country. I think there have been a few settlements. Generally speaking, the ones that have been settled are reported to be down about 5%, and that equates to probably anywhere from 75 cents to $1 per hundredweight, just as a ballpark number. A little bit remains to be seen as far as where volume comes in. It's kind of expected that volume will be no better than flat and could be down a little bit, and some of that will depend on where the actual contract price settlements come in. Interesting in the French fry business that there's a European fryer, Agristo, that recently announced plans to construct a French fry plant in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Total expected cost of that is $450 million, with construction expected to begin this coming spring, but completion will not occur until the summer of 2028. So really no potatoes being consumed by that new plant until the 2028 crop. Additionally, Cavendish Farms, who owns an existing plant out in Jamestown, North Dakota, it's been reported that they have announced a $150 million expansion and upgrade to that plant. The one big wild card here with regards to the 2025 potato crop outlook is the uncertainty on fertilizer prices. As it stands right today, the fertilizer prices would generally be expected to be down The component prices of fertilizer are generally down anywhere from 3 to 13% with nitrogen and the phosphate components being down. Nitrogen being down the lower percentage, whereas phosphates are down, in the 10 to 13% range. But the potassium component pricing is currently up by 1 to 2%. The wild card there is kind of the tariff situation, because a lot of the components for fertilizer that's used in the United States are either generated in the countries of Canada, Russia, or China. They are major players in the fertilizer business, and therefore any potential tariffs that exist out there, potentially have the ability to potentially raise fertilizer prices over and above what would normally currently be expected. So a lot remains to be seen, and I think that one of the challenges right now with growers trying to finalize contracts for the 25 year is the uncertainty on fertilizer pricing. Growers are going to be, I think, a little reluctant to kind of lock into a contract without knowing their fertilizer component pricing, because fertilizer is a pretty significant portion of the overall input cost. Depending on the area, it's typically in the 20% range as far as the total cost of production when it comes to producing a potato crop. So with that, I guess, Kelsey, if there are any questions, that's the majority of my presentation. I'd be happy to open it up to questions that may be out there.
Yeah, so we have a couple, and feel free to keep sending them in the chat. We can go over more. So you mentioned there's some storage challenges in some areas. How will that impact growers in the Northeast?
So I think in general, the storage challenges, and I don't know how severe they are, but there were reported to be some challenges with particularly chip supplies in Wisconsin. And so if anything, I would think that would have somewhat of a positive effect for growers in the Northeast, especially growers of chipstock potatoes that would have potatoes in storage, and potentially could have open potatoes in storage. I know here in Maine, generally the crop was above average, and so I would expect that there are some open chipstock potatoes in storage. The growers that I have spoken to here locally that have moved the entirety of their chipstock crop have indicated that the few opens that they did have, they were able to basically get rid of through their normal marketing channels and at contract price. So that may actually be coming to fruition as we see that. But as time goes on in the chipstock business, and the crop gets a little bit older and gets near the end of its kind of useful life cycle in the May say June timeframe, maybe some of those open potatoes, without challenges out of some other areas, might not move through normal marketing channels.
Yeah, sounds good. And then anything else on seed supplies and why that's down this year? Any implications moving forward on that?
I don't have a really good indication as to why the acreage reductions in the United States. I assume that growers were just responding to kind of market conditions. I know here within the state of Maine locally that we've been under some pressure. There have been some seed farms that have converted either through sales, whole farm sales. They've been purchased by processing grower operations, and so we have lost some seed acreage that way. I think the majority of our remaining seed growers have generally looked to be able to fill that void by increasing the production on their own farms, but that takes time. Um, and then, overall, it appears that the Canadian growers were able to increase their acreage of seed, but not by enough to offset what was the reduction in the U.S. acreage. So I think generally overall, really no concern there, because I think that most growing areas across the U.S. particularly had decent growing years, and so I think the seed quantity and supply, even on that reduced acreage, was probably better than what it would historically be, and lends, I think, some validity to my previous statement that there should be ample seed around to be able to plant the 2025 crop.
Great. And then you mentioned Florida and some challenges there. Are there anything else weather-wise that you're seeing could cause potential issues this year?
Not anything significant. I know that I was actually speaking to one of my seed growers earlier today, and they had mentioned that they were currently shipping seed into the North Carolina area, and North Carolina would be an area that would be just starting to plant potatoes here within, if not right now, within maybe the next couple of weeks to a month for sure. And they just recently got a foot of snow down there, so that's gonna kind of put the brakes to getting any potatoes planted in the North Carolina area probably for a little bit of time. It's been generally cold. If you've been watching the national news, there's been some pretty big Arctic fronts that have come through kind of the eastern half of the country and really put temperatures down well below where we have seen the last couple of years. I know here in Maine, we've probably had the coldest winter that we have had in probably the last 3 or 4 years from an overall temperature standpoint. So it's definitely been a colder winter here in the east. So I think that if anything, that will delay potentially some of the earlier kind of spring/summer potato producing areas that come up the East Coast.
And then lastly, anything, you did touch on it, but anything more on global trade, anything to kind of keep an eye out for? I know it's a big area of uncertainty right now, but any other comments on that?
Yeah, I think the two things here at play are, kind of the rebound of the European crop situation. Europe, from a French fry standpoint, the global French fry trade is something, over 2 billion pounds. I'm trying to think if that's on an annual basis or on a quarterly basis. But anyway, it's significant, and Europe is by far the biggest supplier to that, to the tune of they are about 1 billion pounds more than the next area, which would be the United States, and so their crop rebounding in 2024 is going to allow them, I think, to gain market share, as I mentioned. And not that the U.S. and North American, Canadian French fry producers can't, work to hold that market share, but I think that's going to probably have some headwinds there as far as the industry goes from a frozen potato product standpoint.
Great, thanks. Not seeing any other questions. Oh, it looks like we might have just gotten one. Okay, somebody asked about interest rates. Anything there specific to potato growers?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously interest rates are down by a full percentage point since the Fed started cutting rates back in October or September, whenever it was that they began cutting rates. The thought process is, I mean, we're still thinking that there could be some additional interest rate reductions, but I think they're going to be relatively minor. But obviously, that 1% interest rate reduction, translates to about roughly 12% decrease in interest rate costs for potato growers. And so, I think that obviously on the positive side, it helps on the expense side, but it also may contribute to potentially that expected kind of reduction in, say, frozen potato French fry contracts moving forward. It's one of the other components that we do see that's down. A lot of the other costs in the industry, we are not seeing any significant reduction in. Machinery costs are still elevated. Repair costs appear to still be elevated. I believe chemical costs are at least at this point kind of holding where they have been. So, between fertilizer and interest rates, those really are the only two components of a grower's expenses right now that have seen any type of significant reduction.
Okay, I think that's all of the questions. Thank you again for presenting. And just a reminder, this webinar recording will be available online along with all presentation slides. If that's everything, I guess we can wrap it up. Thank you.
All right, enjoy the rest of your day, everyone.